What's up, dudes and dudettes of the internet? My name's Seth, and today we're going to be talking about the new World Spring portal, how that's going to end up operating and kind of affecting players, but also we're going to be talking more about the Shadow Tower overhaul, show a quick little screenshot of the new Dreadnaught boss, and kind of talk about the Lunar Costumes as well. So we've kind of hinted and talked about all this stuff in the past because the devs have hinted and talked about all this stuff in the past. A lot of this information and features are actually a year, if not 2 years old, but are only now starting to come to fruition and actually start coming into the game. Now, I do want to give you a heads up, folks, that while I'm recording this right now, the only information that's actually available to me and everybody else is from the Chinese test servers of Trove. So a lot of this is very subject to change, and a lot of this has actually been promised to show up on the North American and European servers, the test servers on PC, so we can potentially end up seeing all this stuff for ourselves. And you know, once I end up actually getting some hands-on experience with it, of course I'm going to have an updated video kind of talking about it in a little bit more detail. But first and foremost, this is what the new world portal, I'm just going to call it the world portal because I honestly don't know what else to say about it. But what this is going to do is it's going to completely replace all Uber portals and the Shadow Tower portal as well. So you can kind of see with the portal itself, it's got kind of the elemental portals, elemental worlds, I should say, floating around this primary world. Now, I'm assuming it's going to animate, maybe slowly turn around in circles, if not just the worlds around it are going to end up rotating. But if we end up going to the next screenshot right here, you can see, oh man alive, this is going to be the new method of selecting the elemental worlds, Uber worlds, and everything about it is just going to be from this new menu. So you can see right in the center, we've got the hub. Up next, we've got kind of the novice world, ice world, undead, desert, fae, candy. Then it splits off into the water world, and then that goes all the way up to U9. And one of the things that I personally really love about this is not only do I feel that it's a lot cooler than the current method that they actually have, but most of all, it's a lot more descriptive and instructive to players because visual representation, I feel, is the best way to make most tutorials. You know, that's why I try to do that with my tutorials, is I try to always have, as much as I can, a visual representation of what I'm actually talking about. So with that, the whole point that I'm trying to get at is you can see over on the left with the water world, it actually shows a Trove of Wonder ship. So the Trove of Wonder ship, if you don't already know, I've got tutorial videos on all of that, but that's pretty much the ship where you end up getting the Trove of Wonder boxes, Fragments of Wonder, Gonda potentially, and stuff like that. Some of the rarest mounts in the game are actually gotten out of that ship. But for the most part, lots of players are always very confused. Where do you actually end up farming this thing, right? Because it doesn't have any description. It doesn't say anywhere that it is. And even with it showing it in the screenshot, it doesn't mean that new players are instantly going to know that that ship is something that you can actually find in the water world. But the fact that it's there, I personally feel, is a lot more instructive to players. So you can see the world's kind of going all the way around. Up at the top middle, we've got the Cursed Skyland, which is going to be the air elemental world. Over on the right, hidden behind the UI right here, is going to end up being the fire world, of course, and potentially way all the way at the end where U9 is going to end up being just the generic sky portal. Not exactly sure where it is, but you can see that with this menu in itself, the HUD that's on the right is actually because the character must have clicked on U3, and it's asking, do you actually want to end up going in there? So potentially, if it does end up asking you whether you want to go into the world, it does mean that hunting and going into portals potentially could end up being a little bit slower and less intuitive, but I do feel that this is definitely a lot better for starting players. And you can also see the power rank and the level requirement as well. And more interestingly than that, you can see in the bottom right, kind of right next to the UI, is the Shadow Towers, which means that the Shadow Tower portals are just gonna get completely thrown out of thrown into the garbage, right? Which I personally, as an old school player, think this is very awesome because the old method for getting into Shadow Towers was you had to go into a primal world. There wasn't elemental worlds back then. And you would just randomly find this dungeon that you could use shadow keys on to enter, and then you would go into the Shadow Towers. Then eventually they ended up changing it so that it was a portal that you could craft and throw into club worlds, not your cornerstone. And then finally, now we're getting to this menu right here, where it's going to be, you know, right there in one crafting table. Finally, like, how many portals are going to all get thrown out for one method of transportation, which is absolutely awesome. Now, let's get into the Shadow Tower itself. So you can see in this screenshot right here, this is going to be the new roster for Shadow Tower. So we're going to have Spike Walker, Weeping Prophet, Vengeful Pinata God, which is actually a very difficult boss, if not the most difficult boss in the game, now suddenly is underneath the Hydra boss, which the Hydra definitely looks difficult, maybe even more difficult than the Pinata boss, mostly because of the minions. You know, if you saw my video kind of showing off the Hydra boss and what the devs ended up showing off in a stream, you saw that as the boss ended up getting weaker and weaker, it starts summoning more and more minions, which potentially makes it very, very difficult, you know, just because of the fact that there's not really any armor stat in Trove or anything, right? And then you can see on top of that is the picture of the Dreadnaught, which the Dreadnought kind of reminds me of a picture of a character that was being developed a long time ago to go with a story update with Trove, and then that kind of just fell to the wayside. I don't know where that is, but I'm assuming that's where this character comes in. And also, if we take a look at this screenshot right here, this is the Dreadnought, folks. So it's kind of an obscured vision. We can't really tell what exactly is going on here. However, it looks very similar to Spike Walker, if not a little bit more messed up. So it kind of looks like it's a tripod rather than having 4 legs, but maybe the 4th leg is hidden in the back, and maybe even is maybe an improved version of the Spike Walker, because Spike Walker itself is actually a giant mech with a little character kind of hanging underneath it. And as far as the roleplay is concerned, you're supposed to be damaging that character, which is destroying the machine. So maybe as far as roleplay is concerned, the Dreadnought is that same character upgrading the machine to being something a lot more impressive. That's why it could potentially look similar to Spike Walker, right? But you can see one of the things that I'm most interested in is you can kind of see just above the chat bubble in the background that there's fire on the ground. So there's actually like a passive fire ability that this boss potentially is going to end up happening. Something that's brand new to Trove. We've never seen anything like that where fire particles stay on the ground and cause damage. But then more importantly than that, you can see that the boss actually has a barrier around it, potentially negating damage. Maybe it's you know, protecting it from a percentage, or it's just invulnerable while the shield is up, and thus kind of adding a little bit of a strategy to the boss rather than get strong enough and just kill it in 2 seconds, because that's pretty much what Shadow Tower bosses are. There's not really much strategy to it, right? I have always wanted the idea, I love the idea and wanted Trove to end up having a boss that actually has like a full-on proper strategy to it. Now, this boss might not end up doing that. It might just be that the barrier is around it just because it looks cool. Maybe it's just a special ability it does that just ends up negating damage that's under the same code as the spinning enemies, because while an enemy is spinning, like the Licorice Lasher enemy, they actually reduce the damage that they end up taking. That's why most of you players, pro tip, will have noticed that if you stun a Licorice Lasher or an enemy that spins around, it's going to be stuck in the animation and thus take less damage, right? So anyways, that's a Dreadnought. He looks absolutely beautiful. And if we move on to the next screenshot right here, we can see the new and improved Shadow Tower selection menu. So this is probably what I should have showed you next, but I was most excited to show you the new boss because it looks absolutely beautiful. I'm excited to see what it actually ends up looking like and really excited to fight it. But this is going to be the new Shadow Tower menu that you're going to access from the world portal, right? So you'll end up clicking on Shadow Tower and it's going to show you this. And you can see on the left side, kind of covered by the bubble, there's going to be all the different tiers and different floors, if you will. Each of those floors is going to end up being a different boss. And then we can kind of see behind the font, behind the text bubble, that you're going to be able to select the 3 different difficulties. Right in the middle of the screen, there's going to be normal, hard, and ultra. And then there's going to be the flux currency and amount that you're going to require to actually open the portal, same as always. And then right in the middle is going to be whether you open it or not. Now, there's 2 different separate tabs at the top, which I can only assume, I don't have the translation for it, but I can only assume that clicking on the second tab might go to the leaderboard. Maybe, or maybe it's going to be a bit more of a description of the boss itself, but I don't really think so. Time will tell what ends up actually happening with the Shadow Tower itself, because are they going to end up overhauling and getting rid of all of the dungeons and all of that garbage before the boss and you just grind the boss? Because otherwise, this potentially means that grinding your Shadow Towers every week is going to become a lot longer when the daily or weekly reset ends up happening, because suddenly we're going to have 2 new bosses to grind all the way up from the Shadow Towers dungeons and arenas, right? But most importantly and most excited I am is the bottom middle of the screen. You can see it just shows your Shadow Tower keys. Now, I'm wondering whether or not this means that they finally ended up replacing the Shadow Tower chest at the end. So maybe it's something that you just directly interact with, and maybe they're finally going to put your Shadow Tower keys into your 3rd crafting inventory rather than having to be a physical item that you end up having to pull out of storage and use on the Shadow Tower chest. I'm not exactly sure. We'll see what ends up happening. So last but not least, folks, the Lunar Costumes. I warned you about all of this. Those of you that have kept up with the channel for quite some time have known in almost every single video where I talk about my Empowered Gem boxes, I would always say never spend your Lunar Souls on Empowered Gem boxes if you're trying to go for the Mastery, that is, and already have good Empowered Gems, because eventually you're going to end up spending your Lunar Souls for these Lunar Costumes. So we can see right here that we've actually got a unique item required to craft each of these costumes. These costumes have been in the game code for years. Like these are already a couple years old. They were actually on the Trovesaurus website, which is a fantastic website. It's got tons of mods and stuff like that for PC players. But on that website, they data mined and ended up having most of these costumes for quite some time. Now, any of us could have gone out of our way to actually make all of these costumes into mods so that we could have seen them all early, but that doesn't mean that we would have been able to see the unique video effects of any of these suits, right? So you can see all the class costumes are right here. You can kind of see a little bit of a preview of all of them, and then there's also going to be one unique helmet, I guess, used for all of them. Now, this soul that ends up being used has me very curious, because it looks like to me this is a new unique soul exclusive to Daughter of the Moon, because that right there, doesn't that look like a Daughter of the Moon token or something like that rather than a Lunar Soul? It looks like something like it's the same chakra that Daughter of the Moon has on her back and throws at you while in combat, right? Now, I want to give a shout out to my man Startos, because he ended up actually translating the menu here for me, and apparently the top tab actually says Shadow Shards or something like that, which tells me that maybe whatever this crafting table is going to end up actually having all of the Shadow Tower keys inside it. So maybe you just craft them at the Shadowy Merchant now, rather than crafting them at like an Adventurous Crafting Table or wherever you end up getting it, right? Next one is going to be the Hearts of Darkness, or Dark Hearts, I think was the rough translation, and obviously that's just going to be any of the items that you craft for Hearts of Darkness. Then we've got the Titan Souls, the Lunar Souls, and then whatever this new soul is going to end up being. So potentially this is a little bit, it's time-gated content, because it means that you're going to have to kill the new Daughter of the Moon in order to actually get this soul, rather than being able to save all your Lunar Souls now in order to actually get this. However, the other possibility that, I think could very well be is that maybe in one of the other tabs, there's going to be a new box that you end up getting for Lunar Souls, and that box potentially could end up dropping all sorts of new items, but most of all, it can have a rare chance of dropping this new soul. Now, Time will tell if that's actually the case, but I honestly think that this is just going to be a new type of soul that is exclusive to Daughter of the Moon, because the devs really want to push that Daughter of the Moon is the last boss in the game. And that's pretty much it, everybody. There is a couple other things that actually do have to do with Lunar Soul and a new type of soul, but most of that's actually got to do with gem augmentation. So I'll have another video talking about all of that very, very soon. But that's pretty much everything that we've got right now anyways, as I'm recording this, as to the new Shadow Tower boss and everything like that. Again, if all of this ends up coming on to the test servers for PC, you can bet your butt I'm going to be trying it all out and trying to, you know, get proper videos and actually showing all of the content off rather than just showing off a couple screenshots that are in Chinese, right? But in any case, thank you so much for watching, everybody. It's very, very exciting, all this stuff, especially the overhaul to the Shadow Tower. I'm really excited to see what ends up happening with it. And oh man, like it's just crazy. Like this seems like it's going to be the biggest amount of new content to Trove since ever, because the last big update, I guess, was the Mantle of Power, because it added the gem system, which that to me is new content just because of the fact that it's completely overhauling and adding a new system to the game. Adding a bunch of mounts and stuff like that, that's nothing new. That's just adding something that's already in the game code. But that's just my own personal opinion. Thanks for watching, folks. Very much appreciate it. Don't forget to like, share, favorite, and subscribe for more daily content. Sayonara, and stay epic.